We continue with reaction this morning. The President also saying the government is working with the South African National Roads Agency to improve road infrastructure, specifically in rural areas. In his SONA speech yesterday, the President said that in the last 5 years, SANRAL, which manages about 25,000 kilometers of road, has now been awarded more than 1,200 projects to the value of about 120 billion rand. Let's speak more about this. Bring in SANRAL CEO Reginald Demana, who joins us via our video link this morning. And it's great to have you on the program, sir. Thanks for making time. You know, in any other country, there really wouldn't be a conversations about pothole in Parliament. But in our country, because the problem is so widespread and ricochets into so many other issues, many people will be, let's call it, relieved that the President is aware of how widespread the issue is. Speak to us a bit more about these 1,200 projects and the extent to which they go to at least solving that problem.
Yeah, good morning, and thank you for inviting us. I think, firstly, it's important to understand that in South Africa, we have 750,000 kilometers of roads. Those roads are managed at 3 different levels. We manage only 25,000 kilometers, as the President indicated, just below that, at a national level. And our routes will be the ones you know, your national routes, N1s and N2 and N3 and N4, for example, as well as some of the major strategic routes that connect to that, your regional routes, the R routes. That network is pretty much in a very good condition. And it hardly has potholes. Our contractors make sure that our potholes are repaired in a very short period of time. Then you have the bulk of the network is managed by the 9 provinces as well as the municipality. Each municipality, each province has got to manage the road network within its boundaries. We have 288 road authorities in South Africa that are constitutionally given that right to manage the roads. And that's where the bulk of issues will be occurring in terms of potholes. But now let's come back to what SANRAL, in conjunction with the Department of Transport, is doing. We launched our Operation Valon, which is an initiative where the Minister is trying to extend assistance to municipalities and provinces. And we have shown how well that worked. Your team during the week ran with a story of Standerton, where SANRAL, under the directives of the Minister, we went into town and we fixed pretty much the entire town and all of the streets there that were riddled with potholes to show what Operation Valazonke will be doing. That's a pilot project, and we intend rolling out to the rest of the country in that type of format, of course, subject to getting the necessary funding resources.
Right. Speaking about that, SANRAL, of course, making headlines, perhaps even just over a year ago, around this new procurement process that in some ways has prevented you from being able to spend all the money that you do receive from Treasury. If memory serves, I think there was even litigation involved in some of that. How much of an issue is that today? You know, have you been able to solve that out?
We have moved on very swiftly from that. You will recall towards the end of the year, our board took a very bold decision, accepted a recommendation from management that we consider withdrawing, and then the board approved a new policy. We then also issued new tenders towards the end of the year. 77 of those closed on the 14th of December. And our teams immediately began working on evaluating and awarding. We intend still to roll out more contracts. All in all, we think we should have done about 170 tenders by the end of the financial year in March. That will be to the value of 28 billion. And we hope that we can work through that entire lot and award it by, say, June. So in the first 6 months, we want to have all 28 billion rands of our tenders out in the market, awarded and starting to be rolled out in terms of construction and maintenance. Yeah. So we've moved on very swiftly from those days.
And it's good to hear that it does seem like there's light at the end of the tunnel. But how much did it set you back, this particular issue? Because as you mentioned, there already was a backlog. And because of the back and forth, I imagine that continued to increase for quite some time.
Yeah, look, backlogs are nothing new within the SANRAL space. We've had previous issues. There was COVID, for example. There was the Constitutional Court case in which, in which the Concord set aside the procurement regulations of 2017. We had to go back to the drawing board. There were issues related to local. What does it mean to be local when the 30% legislation came in place a few years ago? So we are used to seeing stumbling blocks from time to time, but it is the ability to ramp up, to turn around within a short space of time that has always stood us in a very good place in terms of executing various backlogs. And indeed, you can see with what we are doing that's exactly what our teams are working on, to accelerate the pace to clear whatever backlogs are there.
What becomes the target now? When do you hope to get this finally cleared?
Well, it's an ongoing process. It's an ongoing process. You amend your business plans as you move along. So we no longer really call it backlog. It's just a continued work, and we are amending our procurement plans for the coming financial year, taking into account what we will not have cleared by March. So we will simply, load it into next year's procurement plan, so that we normalize the situation within this coming financial year.
Yeah. In October of 2022, SANRAL appeared before Parliament and conceded that approximately 10 billion rand would have been lost to e-tolls, this controversial electronic system in Gauteng. Where is the money to recover that going to come from in a context where already resources are scant within SANRAL, given the ongoing work you've just spoken about that you have to do?
I must correct you, 10 billion was not lost due to e-toll. I think what we are talking about is what the accountants will call your typical provisioning for what you might define as bad debt. So when we look at the outstanding debt related to e-toll, and we look at debt that is more than 1 year typically, we then define that as a potentially bad debt that we may not recover. But that doesn't mean we will stop pursuing it. If indeed, when e-tolls are settled and the decision is that all the debt must be recovered, must not be written off, that debt must still be recovered. But for accounting purposes, in terms of keeping your books clean and neat, the accountants typically want you to make provision for that sort of debt that potentially you are not likely to recover it. But it is not lost. It is still there. We don't have the right to just write off government debt. Government debt as SANRAL.
All right. I say it's lost. You call it bad debt. It's still money that SANRAL wouldn't ultimately receive, even if you're factoring it in your books. But I think the point is well made. Reginald Demana, thanks for speaking to us. Appreciate your time on the AM Report. Reginald is the CEO of SANRAL.